Welcome to Mixing Like a Pro. I'm going to be going over some basic mixing techniques. We're going to be using equalization, compression, and reverb. And I'm going to give you guys some examples of each and some pro ways of how to use each. The basic rule of mixing is if it sounds good, it is good. What a mixing engineer is doing is taking the recorded content, drums, bass, guitars, vocals, any other instruments that got recorded, and they're taking all these instruments and trying to make everything sound good together and to try and make the sound as a whole sound good. Some of the difficulties in mixing is when you have too much dynamic content, or maybe sometimes not enough dynamic content, too many instruments occupying the same frequency space, sounds that sound too muddy, sounds that sound too bright, or just a few things that make mixing a difficult process. It's the job of the mix engineer to take all the multi-track recordings and to create a mix that conveys the emotion and impact of the song. Mix engineers create impact and excitement through the use of creative tools like EQ, compression, reverbs, delays, and automation. So in other words, we need to make it sound good, so it is good. So the first of the three areas that I'm going to be covering is equalization. Now it's important to understand that a mix is nothing more than a bunch of frequencies that hit various amplitudes or volume over the course of the song. The human ear hears between 20 Hz and 20 kHz. Everything we hear falls within this range, and instruments occupy certain frequencies more than others. So for example, a bass guitar, most of its amplitude or volume is around 80 Hz. The human voice, or a vocal track, most of its amplitude is between 2 and 4 kHz. So when you visualize your mix, you should see where all your instruments occupy certain frequency ranges. Most instruments have dominant frequency ranges, or the meat of the sound. However, they still occupy other areas of the frequency range, but just not as much. So you're not just mixing instruments together as far as volume, you're actually mixing frequency ranges of your multiple sound sources. If two sound sources occupy the same frequency range, the sound can sometimes sound muddy or maybe not clear. So an example of this would be a vocal track and a guitar track. The main frequency area that a vocal track takes up is between 2 and 4 kHz. The guitar track also takes up most of its energy in this same range. So there's going to be some frequencies that are going to sound muddy, or sometimes the frequencies won't sound as clear in those two instruments. So I'm going to show you an example between the vocal track and the guitar track, and without using the volume control, I'm going to use the EQ to raise and lower the frequency range in the 2 to 4 kHz area to show you that the vocal track can become muffled or less clear depending on how I affect the guitar EQ range. Okay, so in this example, I'm going to show you two instruments that are going to battle each other in a certain frequency range. So I've chosen the guitars and I've chosen the lead vocal track. So what I've done to show this example a little easier is I've grouped all three guitar tracks into one group track. So now I can control the EQ of all three tracks at the same time by using the group track. So now I'm going to open the edit group channel, which brings me to my EQ section. And as you can see, I was talking before about 20 Hz to 20 kHz. So this is the frequency range that these instruments are going to fall under. And each area of the frequency range is going to be where different instruments lie as far as where they're most powerful or where the meat of their sound is. So anything above 0, you're going to be boosting the volume in that EQ range. And anything below 0, you're going to be subtracting the volume or bringing down the volume of that specific frequency range. So I know my vocal tracks are going to be in the 2 kilohertz to 4 kilohertz range. And I know that a lot of my power from the guitars is also in the same range. So they're sort of battling each other right now. So instead of using the volume control or the fader to raise and lower the volume, what I want to do is find the EQ range and either add or subtract in that frequency range to achieve a better result rather than using the volume. So I've opened up my VST channel settings for my guitar tracks. So all 3 are coming through this one guitar track. And we're going to listen to how the guitar sounds with the vocals. And then I'm going to play you examples of bringing the frequency range above 0 and bringing it below 0 so we could hear what the effects are. So I'm going to play the tracks now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to boost the frequency range of the guitar in the same range as the vocal track. And what you're going to notice is the vocal track starting to get buried underneath the guitar. I'm not adjusting the volume. All I'm doing is adjusting the frequency range of the guitar. So let's listen.
I remember what you wore on the first day. You came into my life and I thought, hey, you know this could be something.
So now we hear the frequency range of the guitar in that 2 kilohertz area. So now the vocal track's getting a little bit buried now because I've boosted the guitar frequency range in that area. So now listen to the guitar and the vocal as I bring the guitar EQ down. So now the vocal's coming out a lot better now. And all I've done is bring down the frequency range of the vocal in the guitar track. I haven't touched the volume. All I've affected is that same range that the vocal track is in the guitar. I haven't even touched anything on the vocal track. So I'm going to go back up. So once again, it's sort of hard to hear the vocal track. Now it's a lot more clear. And that's basically what mixing involves. So there's going to be other battles of frequency ranges. For example, the bass guitar and the kick drum are in that same 80 hertz frequency range. So what you're going to be doing is soloing those 2 tracks and doing the same thing that we did with the vocal and guitars. You're going to want to be able to hear clearly both instruments when they're being played together without really taking away their frequency range and the power of each instrument. And you'll continue this as you go through the mix. You'll be EQing and basically making way for different tracks to come through and not mask other tracks. And once you've completed this with all your tracks, hopefully you'll have a much clearer and better sounding mix.